We are continuing now with the agenda for the common good. And last year, Ann Crittenden spoke at our convention. She has been predicting a new revolution of mothers based on the grassroots reaction to readers of her book, The Price of Motherhood. And the subtitle of that book says it all: Why the Most Important Job in the World is Still the Least Valued. Well, mothers know that. Mothers know that, and they are ready to join together in a movement to shake things up. Joan Blades, one of the brilliant innovators who co-founded MoveOn.org, has joined with Kristen Rowe Finkbeiner to launch a new book and a new film called The Motherhood Manifesto, and a new organization called Moms Rising that will give voice to that revolution. We are very proud that they're using Take Back America to help launch that new movement, that new website, that new book, that new film. Please check it out. The book is The Motherhood Manifesto: What America's Moms Want and What to Do About It. Please welcome Joan Blades.
Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and this is an incredible conference. Most of you probably know of me through Move On, but late 2003, I ran into some data that really caused me to step back and think, what is this? And that was essentially that mothers make 27% less than your average man, and single mothers make 34 to 44% less. And I had thought that equal wages had become a common thing, and I was really taken aback. And all of a sudden, a lot of different parts and pieces started falling in place. Okay, I get it why there's so many women and children in poverty. And I also get it why there's so few women in leadership. Because most women now need to work. Yes, the majority of mothers are working mothers. But we still have an expectation of a linear career path, which the on-ramp and off-ramp, when you get back on again, you never get back on that career path the way you were before. And more than that, there are structural issues and policy issues that really do not support families. And when you're talking about mothers, you're really talking about kids, and you're talking about whole families. It is a system. And I started thinking about it, and I wrote a 2-page paper called The Motherhood Manifesto, and I shared it with a couple of my friends just because I was trying to get this solidified in my mind. And all of a sudden, I had people saying, yeah, you got to do something. And I started thinking about that, and they actually convinced me I should. So I wrote a book with my amazing co-author, Kristen, called The Motherhood Manifesto. And we not only did a book and a film and Moms Rising and a T-shirt, we have a song. So if you could please play the song now, because you're never supposed to have more than 3 points. We're trying to work with that difficulty by having a song. Is the song ready? Please? It's always much more impressive. You may know the song. Sing along if you want to. Where is it? Okay, so I thought it would be boring to go through a list. And, you got to express these things. But it's all interlinked, intimately interlinked. And we started the book with maternity leave because, well, that's kind of where it all starts for a family. And I was shocked when I found out that there are 168 countries in the world that were studied, and 4 of them don't have maternity leave. Now, it's us, Papua New Guinea, Swaziland, and Lesotho. What's that about? It just, it's amazing to me. So we don't support mothers. There's bias against them in hiring. They're 44% less likely to be hired with an absolutely equivalent resume. We like mothers, right? If you might be a mother, and if you're not, you certainly have a mother. But we're doing a very poor job of putting the pieces together. But to really get to issues that we all share. Because, I came to politics originally only less than 8 years ago around an issue, the impeachment scandal, where the vast majority of Americans, left, right, and center, were ready for us to censure and move on. That's where the name comes from, move on to pressing issues facing the nation. And I'm a mediator by training. My favorite thing to do is to find places where really there's agreement. And I think on these issues, across party lines, across cultural lines, across economic lines, we can find common ground. And I think that's exciting. And I want to do it. So we start with stories in the book, in each case. And we start by talking. Stories get you to the heart of the matter. And we start with Selena, who was pregnant, figured out she could take off 1 month from work. And so she took off she went into labor early and she had her child prematurely. So it turned out she had to go back to work. Days after giving birth, she went back to work because she was not about to spend that 1 month with the baby in the hospital. So you can imagine what that felt like. Well, then the baby got out of the hospital. It was okay. She had a month with her baby. Then what do you do? Well, she had a wonderful organization that actually allowed her to bring the baby to work with her. Not many organizations allow that. And she learned how to type while breastfeeding, and what's that about? We've got women that don't have places for their children, but they're going back to work because they're choosing between feeding their children and taking care of their children. And it's hugely important that we start providing real support for mothers and families. And I've only gotten to M, and I know my time is up. So you have to come to the panel we're going to do tomorrow, where we have incredible women and one man that are going to be talking about these issues, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. And now Kristen's going to talk to you because she's amazing, and she's my co-author and co-founder. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. As I was getting my thoughts together this morning about what to say, my 9-year-old son walked into the room. And he said, "Mom, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to speak at the podium today after some people who might be president." And he said, "Mom, that's really not a good idea. They're going to be all riled up about what other people say, and they're not going to be paying attention. But I have some tricks up my sleeve for you." And I said, "Really? What are they?" I was kind of curious. He's 9. To my knowledge, he's never written a speech before. He said, "Mom, you got to start with a joke." And I said, "Okay, what's the joke?" He said, "Why did the mother cross the road?" I said, "Okay, why?" I was totally curious at this point. He said, "To get to work, like 72% of other mothers." This is the advantage of open, flexible work. I work from home. Clearly, my children are picking up inadvertently on the issues. Let me share another couple of stories with you, just really briefly, some of which Joan mentioned, all of which are in the book and the film. Kiki, a single mother, featured in the book and film, couldn't find a job because she kept being asked in interviews if she was a mother and if she had a husband. She was denied jobs on the basis of her answers. She was indeed a single mother. This was legal, and it is legal. Selena had her baby prematurely on a Wednesday and was back at her desk on a Monday while her baby stayed in the hospital because she couldn't afford to take the time off of work and also feed her children. The Dorset family, fully insured, went into bankruptcy because of their son's chronic medical condition. Like 76% of people who go into bankruptcy due to medical issues, they had insurance. There are many families like Kiki's, Selena's, and the Dorsets all over our country. In fact, a quarter of families with children under 6 live in poverty right now. When this many people have the same problem at the same time, we have a societal issue, not a personal failing. There are known solutions. There are known solutions to these common shared problems. There are policies and programs that just need to be dusted off and passed, as well as new innovative ideas waiting to be discovered. And MomsRising.org is collaboratively working with a diverse group of organizations to build a massive online resource for grassroots that will give family-friendly policies traction. It's long past time to put our policies and our resources where our mouth has been on family values. Thank you. Would all the mothers in the audience please stand up briefly? Now, would anyone who has ever had a mother stand up with the mothers? As you can see, this is a completely unifying movement. We're working together with more than 50 other aligned organizations, which represent some of the nation's strongest women's organizations, family advocacy groups, mothers groups, child advocacy groups, unions, healthcare organizations, democracy groups, parenting groups, the faith community, and many other organizations which all have aligned missions. You can check out our list of aligned organizations at www.momsrising.org. There are links galore. They're all wonderful organizations. Check them out. And we're working together in a wide variety of ways. One example is our What's Cooking program. It is an issue list of coordinated action items on our webpage, and it's an organizational program that highlights the issues of our programs and other people's programs, other organizational programs, to get to the grassroots together. This is truly a dynamic grassroots effort. At the heart of this organization, Moms Rising is about working with dozens and dozens of groups and mobilizing around motherhood and family issues together to build a strong movement. To give you a better idea about our What's Cooking program, which is hard without a PowerPoint, so you can't see it, you have to go check it out. I'm going to talk about what's up there now, just very briefly. It's organized into a menu of activism items, and it rotates regularly, so they're not always the same. We're taking advantage of current contemporary issues where we can make a difference with grassroots engagement. The main course right now on our Moms Rising website is a shared petition with Mothers Ought to Have Equal Rights, also known as Mothers. This petition asks media executives to focus on real issues that unite us and not on manufactured, media-grabbing fiction about the so-called mommy wars between women who are employed and women who are at home full-time. We want people to talk about real issues that unite us and not that divide us. The vegetable dish. It's our second action on the menu item. We're asking Moms Rising members and others to tell Congress what type of health care program their family needs. This action is being done in partnership with the Physicians for a National Health Care Program. Moms Rising has asked members to take Congress's Citizen Health Care Working Group survey and also respond to survey recommendations. For the dessert right now, we are working with Main Street Moms Online to partner on a project to register graduating high school seniors to vote. Moms Rising is also actively supporting legislation with a number of groups, including now the National Organization for Women. There's a petition on our homepage right now by way of example that supports Representative Woolsey's Balancing Act. We also have email alerts. We're working with the AFL-CIO, and a next email outreach is going to happen. And clearly, we're a collaborative idea whose time has come. Family issues represent the wave of the future. Many analysts point out that the married women voters tend to vote more on issues that affect their family and children than on the political party of the candidate. There is an incredible opportunity here for those who incorporate these issues into their campaigns, and neither party has frankly picked it up and run with it yet. In fact, Celinda Lake, a nationally renowned pollster, agrees that this group packs a powerful political punch. She says, quote, "Moms are a critical part of the vote, targeted by both political parties, and are increasingly the swing vote that determines the outcome of elections," end quote. It's long past time for our policies and programs to catch up with our modern realities. It's time to be decisive. It's time to take back the issue of family values and move towards common sense solutions for all Americans. It's time for change. We're previewing our Motherhood Manifesto film, just a bit of it, at our press conference at 11 a.m., and we invite you to come and join us in the Chevy Chase room. Thank you for your time, and let's get working.
Thank you, both of you. The press conference is open to the public, and on Wednesday at 9:45, there's a real organizing session for Moms Rising to explain in greater depth all of the many things that Moms Rising is doing. Thank you both. The next item on the agenda for the common good is an issue that everybody gives lip service to, and that's education. We have a globalizing economy. The answer, kids and families are told, the answer to getting a good job and a good future is getting a good education. And yet we're giving much more lip service than we are actually doing anything about making the U.S. educational system one that serves everybody and gets everybody a chance. We are going to hear not from George Miller today, because he sends his regrets that he has a meeting of his education subcommittee that he has to be at. But we are going to hear from a staffer from his operation. And first we are going to hear from Wendy Purifoy, who is, hey, fan club over here, who is president of the Public Education Network, the nation's largest network of community-based school reform organizations. Please welcome Wendy Purifoy.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be a part of this conference and to be a part with this panel of such distinguished speakers. Our time is short, so I want to say a few things and then urge you to do something about public education. One, here's an important statistic. Less than 30% of Americans who are eligible to hold bachelor's degrees hold bachelor's degrees. That's a pretty stunning statistic. When you think about immigration, when you think about foreign policy, when you think about just reading the ballot initiatives at your local elections, it is very difficult to be able to engage in your full participation as a member of a democracy without being well educated. We have a very well-written social contract in our Constitution, but we need an intellectual contract in order to carry out our responsibilities as Americans. Public Education Network is a national group. We are comprised of community-based organizations across 34 states in the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. We reach out to over 12 million children in over 1,600 school districts. We have taken this model of a community-based organization into the Philippines, into Peru, and into Mexico. We are focused on improving the quality of public education for poor and disadvantaged children. These funds have been around since 1983. They've raised and distributed over $4 billion for everything from last dollar scholarships to deep systemic reform efforts around professional development for teachers, helping kids to go on for higher education, and helping school districts to implement high standards for all kids. What has become very important for us is to be able to build a constituency of people in this country who know what type of education our children need, are willing to take the steps so that our children receive that education, and are willing to join people who don't have children in public schools because parents cannot do it alone. In order to have the country we want and need, we need an engaged public. So, for the last 5 years, Public Education Network has been engaged in building the infrastructure for a national campaign to engage the American people to tell a different story about public education, to engage the American people to go into action about public education, and to help people know that they have the power to change our public schools. Here's what we've learned from some of our focus groups. Americans believe that it is necessary for every child in this country, regardless of their zip code and regardless of where they live, to be educated. They believe that the public schools should be the place where children and their families are given the option to succeed. We heard lots of things about vouchers, but the bottom line is Americans hold public education as a core value. Americans understand that their children and other people's children must be educated to receive a better education than what the previous generation did. We just did a focus group in Colorado, and one of the people in Colorado said, look, when I was in biology class, I dissected pigs, I dissected rats, I had snakes. Now my kid is coming home with a mimeograph. I want my kid to have a better education than what I got, and that doesn't appear to be happening. How can I do that? People also know that the success of public schools is linked to individual, community, and national success and world peace. What is very interesting is to hear people talk about the fact that the members of our armed forces are probably educated in the public schools. We are sending over to other parts of the world to defend democracy and people who may not be well educated enough to do that. And so one of the things that people want to make sure that our schools can do is educate people for their own individual success and for the country's future. Americans know what constitutes a good education, and so I want to say that the standards-based reform movement has been very successful. People know you need qualified teachers, although lots of people thought we already had qualified teachers. People know that children need to be in small classes because they develop relationship there. They want their kids to have rigorous curricula, and they want their children to succeed in schools. So why is the nation failing so many of its children in urban, suburban, and rural communities? For 3 reasons. Americans don't have access to the information that they need, not policymakers, but that they need to make good decisions about their local schools. The second is that people feel that they elect people and those people do not carry out their expectations. They just move out of the way. Everybody's an education president, an education mayor, an education school board member, but the public is not seeing the results. That has amounted to a sense of feeling very powerless about what to do. So think about it. The American public holds 3 key responsibilities. They set expectations, and they know what they are. They elect public officials to carry out those expectations, and those public officials they believe are failing them. And finally, in the end, they allocate or don't allocate the resources that are needed for our children to be educated. So what is to be done? What's to be done is that we are about to launch at Public Education Network a campaign to give America's kids good schools. It will educate people across this country in ordinary language about what constitutes a good school so people can learn and feel activated by that knowledge. Secondly, over the next 5 years in this country, we will have 2 sets of midterm elections. We will reauthorize No Child Left Behind. We'll have a presidential election. We'll have the census. We'll have a number of ways in which Americans can be electorally responsible and be able to share their accountability by knowing what a quality public education is and rating their public officials on it. And finally, there are sets of actions that people can take, from having good conversations about public schools instead of trashing them, to be able to have an opportunity to volunteer for public schools, and to be able to have ways in which they can help America forge a new contract to educate its people. Look forward in October to Give Kids Good Schools. I hope you'll sign up for the Penn News Blast. If you go onto our website, it's publiceducation.org. It's a news blast that goes out to about 250,000 people. And please send us emails about what you think you can do in your community to give kids good schools. Thank you.
George Miller is our leader on education in the House of Representatives. He is a fighter for education and has been for a long time. We don't have George today because he has to be at his committee meetings, but he sent Ellen Bannon, who works as his chief top aide on education at the House Education and Workforce Committee. She's responsible for shaping Democratic policy on student aid, college loans, and higher education. Please welcome Ellen Bannon.
Good morning. How is everyone? All right, the coffee's working. Well, again, Mr. Miller extends his apologies. He really wanted to be here today, but he wasn't able to. So I will speak to you instead. I'd like to start with 2 points. The first point being that a college education is critical to providing better opportunities for Americans. I think we all agree on that. My second point is, if we, Democrats, progressives, parents, students, if we're going to make college more affordable, then every single person in this room and everyone who you work with back home need to engage on this issue now. This is critical. I think there's no question that we have a college affordability crisis right now in the country. Since 2001, college tuition at four-year public colleges and universities has risen by 40%, just since 2001. We are, for the first time ever, asking a generation of young people to go deeper and deeper into debt in order to attain a college degree. The typical undergraduate now leaves college with $17,500 in debt. Nearly 1/4 of recent college graduates have too much debt to manage on a starting teacher's salary. More and more students today are holding off on going to college, or they're skipping it altogether, and that's because they can't afford it. When faced with this college affordability crisis, what did the Congress do? It put college even farther out of reach for most Americans. Just this year, the Congress carried out the largest raid on student aid ever. This past February, the Congress voted to cut $12 billion out of the student aid programs. That's right, that was a bad decision. Now, you think, well, we could look at the White House. We should be able to look to the White House for leadership. But it's even worse. The Bush administration has failed to provide any leadership on this issue. In fact, in the year 2000, when then Governor Bush was running for president, he pledged to raise the maximum Pell Grant, which is the college scholarship, to $5,100. Did it happen? No. Since 2003, the Pell Grant has been frozen at $4,050. Now, I was never the best math student, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't add up to $5,100. This Congress is headed in the wrong direction. The people who run Congress today are more interested in passing out favors to special interests, like the big companies who are in the student loan business. They're more interested in doing this than they are in helping the average student and family. We have to do better, and we can do better. And we have to do better because no qualified student should ever miss out on a college education simply because he or she cannot afford it. We also have to do better because college affordability crisis is bad for America. Our economic competitiveness and our ability to prosper depends on having a highly skilled and trained workforce. We can't do this if our students can't afford to go to college. Okay, so what should we do? First, simply we should cut the interest rates on student loans in half, and House Democrats have proposed that, and we hope that you'll support that. For the typical, thank you. For the typical borrower with $17,500 in debt, this would save them about $5,600 over the life of their loan. Second, using real money, no gimmicks, we should increase the maximum Pell Grant to $5,100. Just because the president can't do it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Third, we should also provide colleges and universities with incentives to keep tuition costs down. It's time for a new direction. But in order to achieve a new direction, we need to take control of the Congress, and we need to take control of the country. The only way to do that is this November, and we need you to do that. Everyone here in this room and every organization represented here at this conference is critical to this effort. Your voices and your efforts on the ground are so important to this process. Let's fight for change, let's make college more affordable, and let's take back America. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Glad to see our next speakers have arrived, and I'm sure they got the word that we're trying to make it short. We've been talking about all these big issues, these big fundamental changes that we have to make for the common good, and they aren't small potatoes. We're going to have to use the political system in order to get this done. And you all know the kind of political system that we have now where money dominates everything. That's how they keep their power. Ellen didn't mention it, but it was Congressman John Boehner who cut the deal to raise the interest rates on student loans in collaboration with his education funders. So the last and most important, perhaps, part of this agenda for the common good is labeled Clean Out the Stables, Political Reform Without Delay. And we've gotten rid of delay, but now we've got to really clean out the stables. And we've got to do that in two ways. We've got to put forth a reform agenda that can really clean the political system. And one of our speakers is going to talk about that, Shelley Pingree. And the other part of this is we've got to connect with people, what they're going through in their daily lives on energy prices, on Medicare, on all of the things that they confront, and get them to realize that it's the money and power of the money in Washington that keeps their lives expensive and difficult and makes mothers unable to have a decent life. So with that brief introduction, I want to bring on Shelley Pingree, who is President and CEO of Common Cause since 2003. She spent 8 years in the Maine Senate and last 4 years as Majority Leader, and she was also a Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate in 2002. Please welcome Shelley Pingree.
Thank you very much. Eli and I were just having a quick conversation because we thought Eli was going first. But Eli will close down the house, and I will open it up for him. And first I want to thank Roger and everyone for Take Back America for having us here today. And because I know this is the last panel of the plenary of the morning, I will speed right through it. So listen, because I'll be talking fast. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I want to talk just a little bit about what I think is a very important message, and that is why progressives should care about issues like reform, clean money, our elections, and how we conduct our business in the democracy, and why I think it's undermining all those things that Roger just mentioned to you and that we care so much about. As many of you know, I'm the president of Common Cause, where I've been for 3 years, and while we are a nonpartisan organization, I have worked most of my political life in partisan politics and in progressive politics. I'm from the state of Maine, where I was the majority leader, where we passed the first bill on prescription drug pricing, where we dealt with corporate accountability and environmental issues. But in fact, I don't think we could have done all the things that we do and that Maine continues to lead on if it hadn't been for the fact that Maine's one of the first states in the country to have publicly financed elections, to have some of the best, absolutely. And I'm proud to say Eli has now returned home to his state of Maine and is a resident again. We have some of the best election laws in the country, which I want to talk about. We have pretty reasonable redistricting laws, and we have a lot of local media, community radio, low power FM. People can get access to information. All of those have been extremely important to those things that we care about, and I think progressives need to care about those issues in your home state and here in Washington, and let me just talk about a couple of quick examples. Let's go to elections. Remember Florida, remember Ohio. You know, how are we going to be sure it doesn't all happen in 06 and 08 if we don't get it straight with this system? Our response, and I'm glad this is our response in some ways, is to register more voters and take them to the polls. But remember, we registered all those voters in Ohio, and we lost by 65,000 votes. No matter how many we register, even if there is a good progressive message this time, the fact is, if we don't get a paper trail on electronic voting machines, or in fact, you know, today there's increasing questions about the audibility and whether we should even be using electronic voting machines. But you have Democrats who have bills in Congress that they won't even support to make sure we have this happen, even though many states around the country are now dealing with it. But there are even less sexy voting issues. What about partisan elected officials who can also be involved in political campaigns where they're deciding, when they're deciding how to allocate voting machines in states like Ohio? Remember those long lines? Because there were more voting machines in certain districts where there were wealthy voters and not enough in those places where people stood for 2, 3, 6 hours, had to get home for childcare, had to put money in the parking meter. You had to deal with all of those issues. And then when are we going to talk about same-day registration and mandatory registration of high school students? If everybody voted, I think our progressive issues would get a lot further than we think they're getting right now. Let me talk just briefly about redistricting. Remember Texas? Everybody thinks that there will be a big change in Congress, but what if there aren't enough competitive seats? 98% of incumbents get reelected. Even Democrats don't get challenged in their races anymore on the issues that we care about. There were more contested elections in Iowa than in New York and California combined in 2002 because Iowa has nonpartisan panels regulating their elections. But lastly, I want to talk about money. As Roger said, as you're going to hear much more about from Eli and others, the fact is, how many of those issues that we care about, prescription drug pricing, health care, predatory lending, net neutrality last week in the congressional vote, all those people who are theoretically on the side of the issues that we care about, who are taking money from the pharmaceutical manufacturers and the telecom companies and the banks and the credit card companies. Wouldn't it be nice if once in a while we could take a vote just based on the policy, not who gave you a campaign contribution? And this is a problem on the side of progressives and conservatives. Nobody wants to change the system that got elected, and everybody on our side says, oh, don't worry, we're going to be back in power, and then we're going to have enough money to do those things that we want to do differently. But you know, the system of clean elections works. It's been passed in different ways in New Jersey, New Mexico, North Carolina, Vermont, Portland, Oregon, Albuquerque, and Maine and Arizona, which both have statewide ability for people to run under clean elections. In Arizona, it's made a difference. 48% more people of color run for office, 33% more women, tremendously increased voter turnout. In Maine, my home state, 90% of the people running for office this time are likely to run as clean elections candidate, Republicans and Democrats. Today, we have a gubernatorial primary in Maine. 2 out of the 3 Republicans running will be running as publicly financed elections, and we've passed the Durgo health plan there, covering more people than almost any other state in the country because we have candidates who are clean elections candidates. Let me say one last thing about it. The part we often forget. You know, I ran for the United States Senate, and I probably called many of you on the telephone when I did, and I was the Senate Majority Leader in Maine. When I ran for office, here's what I did 12 hours a day. I picked up the phone and I said, "Hi, could you write me a check?" I don't care if you're in Oklahoma or Kansas or Los Angeles or New York. I didn't have time to go out and meet with voters because 12 hours a day I was looking for money. That is no way to run a democracy, and that's what our elected officials are doing today. Here's the difference. In the state of Maine, my daughter's a state legislator. She collects $105 contributions for people who can write a $5 check and participate in the system. And then you know what? She's done. She gets an allocation of money, and she goes and knocks on doors. She talks to voters. She actually connects with people who have something to say about the political process. And it turns into more people participating, higher voter turnout, young people, women, people of color who can now run for office. A very different system that puts the very people in office that we want to have voting on our elections. So let me just sum up here. We need clean money. June 27th is going to be Clean Money Day. We're working with our good friends at Public Campaign and Campaign for America's Future, people around the country who are going to have house parties. We need you to sign up. We need you to be a part of this, to go out and ask your candidates to take a pledge, to say, I'm going to support clean elections. I'm going to clean up Congress when I get elected. I'm going to clean up your state legislature. Just think of it. What if we had a system where everybody who wanted to register to vote could do it, where every vote was counted, where we had fair elections, where 98% of incumbents weren't automatically reelected, where anyone who wanted to run could run for office, where voters could get information. You know what? We wouldn't be worrying so much about the things that we care about, health care and an unreasonable war. We would have the policies that we want, and we'd have a country we could be proud of. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Shelley. Probably everybody in this room has been galvanized into political action at one point or another in the last several years by Eli Pariser. He's brilliant at motivating people to take action politically. He's done it against the war. He's done it on a wide range of issues that he takes on as executive director of MoveOn.org Political Action and MovedOn.org Civic Action. We're proud to say that we're working closely with him on healthcare and energy and democracy. A big discussion of that will be Wednesday morning during breakfast, brainstorming about how we can all work together on these issues. Please welcome Eli Pariser.
Good morning, everybody. People still out there? Well, good morning. And thanks for having me. With apologies to Bob and Roger, I have to depart from the script this morning a little bit. I'm supposed to talk today about the cost of corruption, but first I have to talk a little bit about the cost of war. And if I'm out of line, you can chalk this up to the fact that I'm young and I don't know any better, so don't worry about it. But I need to talk about Iraq because it is the overarching issue of this time period. And, you know, it's the thunderhead that is blotting out the sun over this country. Every day I open the newspaper and am filled with new anger and new sorrow about what's going on. Yesterday I read that May was the bloodiest month in Baghdad since the occupation began. According to Iraq's health ministry, and I quote, nearly 1,400 Iraqi civilians were murdered in targeted killings last month in Baghdad alone. Many more died in indiscriminate bomb blasts. And the day before, I read an interview with a young man named Ryan Briones, one of the young soldiers, a guy about my age actually, who was had to clean up after the apparent massacre in Haditha. And he described the bodies that he had to clean up. He said they ranged from little babies to adult males and females. I'll never be able to get this out of my head, he said. This left something in my head and my heart. For those of us who opposed this war from the beginning, these scenes of disaster and bloodshed provide no consolation. I can feel no joy that history has proven our warnings so vividly correct. This is what a failed war looks like. Billions of dollars being spent to inflame hatred against our nation, civilians being killed in cold blood, and young soldiers being forced to choose between following orders and doing what they know is wrong. A nation with a failed war on its hands is a nation in need of leadership. But as we know far too well, bold leadership on this issue on both sides of the aisle is far too uncommon. And it's worth asking today, why is that? When the public demands that we bring our troops home, why do so many leaders, not just Republicans but Democrats as well, insist on staying a doomed course? The whole purpose of our democracy, as envisioned by our nation's founding revolutionaries, is to ensure that when the leaders are out of sync with the people, the wisdom of crowds prevails. So why isn't it? And the answer is simple: because our democracy is broken. And because it's broken, our representatives have been insulated from the demands and concerns of an angry public. Fixing our democracy is a key step on the path to ensure that we never, ever repeat this kind of bloody mistake again. Our democracy is broken because instead of representing their constituents, elected leaders are representing their donors. When the popular mandate for this war has faded away, when Republicans can no longer turn to the people they represent, they can turn to Exxon and to Halliburton. And it is this corrupt entanglement of power and profit that makes the Bush policy of staying a failed course possible. Nor, sadly, is this a problem that is unique to Republicans. These entanglements affect some Democrats as well. Indeed, it's the Exxons and the Halliburtons that fund the consulting class of professional election losers that continue to advise some Democrats to ignore America on Iraq. But let's not kid ourselves. In the last 15 years, oil and gas companies gave over $190 million to politicians in America, and 3 times as much of that money went to Republicans as to Democrats. Over the same period, defense contractors gave $62 million to Republicans to win their elections. There's a deliberate strategy here. These big industries have decided that the Republican Party is their party. They bought it and they own it. To put it a little colloquially, these politicians know who their daddy is, and it ain't us. And it's in this way that big money corrodes our democracy. It bankrolls the concrete border wall that separates elected leaders from the public. Because the nation's largest corporations have very different interests from you and me and most Americans. And they're perfectly willing to continue funding the Republican Party and its war strategy as long as they get the kickbacks and the subsidies they need, even after the public has long walked away. So how do we solve this problem? Well, on Iraq, we must call for a responsible exit strategy that gets our troops home by the end of the year. That's the starting point right there. But we've got to break down this wall of big money that separates our elected representatives from the people they're supposed to serve. There's an old saying, you can't clean up the water if you don't get the hogs out of the creek. And I feel like that's what we've got ahead of us. And there's no one else who's going to do this. It's just you and me and a couple million of our closest friends. There are some exceptions, some politicians who are speaking out on this, but most of them are entrenched in the current system. As they say, politics is too important to be left to the politicians. Together, we've got to get up and throw the Halliburtons out. And there's good news. The good news is, as Shelley says, this is working. Clean money gets these big companies out of the picture. And the other piece of good news is that when we shine light on the collusion between politicians and these companies, voters respond. MoveOn went up a month ago with a series of ads that connects politicians' money that they take from donors to the votes that they've taken in return. We polled before and afterward, and we found a dramatic shift. In the districts where we ran the ads, people moved away from their Republican congresspeople by 10 percentage points. It's a huge shift. And what it means is good news for democracy. It means that when people have this information in their hands, they will do the right thing. We can break down the wall. And so it's a dark time. It is a dark time for our nation and for the world. And living under these great storm clouds from Iraq, it's hard to believe sometimes that we'll ever see the sun again. But we've never been a defeatist country, and now's not the time to start. We've got to get out there and knock on doors and make calls. We've got to go to the parties that Shelley and others are organizing this year. We've got to talk about this issue with our neighbors and our friends and the guy at the corner store. We've got to throw the windows open on our shuttered institutions of government so that we can let the fresh air in. No one else is going to do that, but we can and we will. And as we do that, as the sunlight comes over, as the great wall between our leaders and us begins to crumble, things will start to change. And our politicians will learn again to listen to their constituents. And when they do, the young men and women serving in Iraq will finally hear the words they've been longing to hear for so long. Welcome home. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, audience.